All right, so Nancy is asking, upon death, your body lies in sleep. Then where does your soul go at time of death?
So I'm going to share my screen again. So one moment here as we get that set up. There we go. So you should be able to get the screen up in a moment. And this is topic I've spoken of a few times, but I wanted to do it more thoroughly this time to really walk everybody through definitively on like what is the soul and a little bit about what is the spirit. And this is the more I study it, the more I realize it is a big issue. It does affect us the way we think about ourselves. It has implications on that. So I'm not trying to be quarrelsome and disagree with 99% of Christianity, but I'm wanting us to really dig deeper and think differently, especially about like how would a Jew or Hebrew think? How did the biblical writers think? And hopefully that's closer to how God really made things to actually be, and understand maybe how we have Christianity has inherited some false beliefs over time. So let's start with what is actually a soul. So we start with Genesis 2:7. It says, "And the Lord God formed man of the dust of the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and man received a living soul." Now, those of you who've heard this verse and you're really familiar with it, you've probably realized I changed it, right? It's not received. It actually says man became a living soul. That's what it says. You are the soul. We are a soul. And in fact, the animals, we'll see a verse where animals are the living souls if you use the King James version. So it's not this thing that we have and it's separate from us and separates from us. Like you together are the soul. And here's a look at different translations that are a little bit better than the KJV. And this is one reason why I'm not always saying yeah, KJV is the best all the time. There's some reasons why I like it sometimes, but there's reasons or times when I don't like it. And this is one of those. When it comes to stuff like souls and spirits and hell, it doesn't do so good. Now, we just have to upgrade to the NKJV, and immediately we have, and man became a living being. And that's the same thing with the NIV. Man became a living being. And I have to give the prize actually to the ESV, which gets the closest, I think, to the true meaning here, which is the man became a living creature. And I would actually, if in Jay's revised version, it would say the man became a living, breathing creature. And we'll talk about why is that. So let's go back. Let's look at the Hebrew, not all of it, but some of the key words, because you're going to see repeated themes just in this one verse, just in Genesis 2:7. And we pick it apart, we see it says God formed man, and the Hebrew word for man is Adam. Adam, right? We all know Adam. Well, Adam also means man. And he made Adam of the dust of the ground, which in Hebrew is Adama. So Adam is made from Adama, and God breathed into him. And the word for that is nafach. And God breathed into him the breath, the neshama of life, and Adam became a living nefesh. Now we'll go look at all those different words, not the ground words, but you see ground is used 3 times, ground, in a sense. And we have air, breathing related words used 3 times. Nafak, neshama, and nefesh. So ground, air. That this kind of is the recipe then for making man, right? So dirt plus breath is the nefesh, is the living, breathing creature. So nafak, it means to breathe or to blow. To blow, breathe or blow. Neshama means breath, and nefesh is a breathing creature, and it's taken on so many other meanings like throat, person, life, so much, right? But in this context, especially in these earlier passages of Genesis 1, Genesis 2, even like Genesis 6 about the flood, It's living, breathing creature. So breath, breath, breath. And here's an example. Genesis 1:20 says, "And God said, let the water swarm with the swarms of living creatures in the fish, and let the birds fly above the earth." So, so even creatures in the waters are called a nephesh. Ecclesiastes 12:7 now is an interesting verse, and this is one where I think prompted Nancy's question, right? About, okay, so if death is sleep, well, doesn't the Bible say something goes back to God? So it says, "Then shall the dust return to the earth as it was, and the spirit shall return unto God who gave it." And notice we're reading from the KJV, and this is another unfortunate translation, but this word for spirit is the word ruach. And almost every time you see the word spirit used, it is the the Hebrew word ruach. And ruach, well, and before we move forward though, do you see a theme here in this verse that's similar to what we looked at earlier? Where have you seen dust, and where have you seen ruach, wind, water, breath, wind, breath, and earth? Well, that would be back at Genesis 2:7. So if to make a man, God took earth and breathed into it, then when man dies, you expect you would end up with the two components, earth and breath. And this is exactly what this verse is referring to. And then ruach, the word there means wind, literally means wind, but then it could also mean breath, moving air, and get into things like mind. And this is why it's often translated spirit. But notice it has that breath aspect to it again. So Ecclesiastes 12:17. We got the dust, you got the ground, you got the air, just as we talked about. Sounds like Genesis 2:7. Now let's look at another verse. Psalm 104:29. It says, "Thou hidest thy face, they are troubled. You take away their breath, ruach, they die and return to the dust." Isn't it fascinating? This is the KJV. And even here, the KJV is using breath to translate ruach. It's just all over the place. And you see this, most translations are just so inconsistent. Okay, this time we'll go with spirit. This time we'll go with breath. And when you're reading English, you have no idea. It's just the same word. And that's why we really do try to emphasize here the Hebrew and educate you on these things, Hebrew and the Greek, so that you can be better aware of what's going on. So God takes away the breath, and what do you know? They die and return to the dust. Same formula we saw from Genesis 7, ground and air. Here's Genesis 7, verse 14 to 15. It's talking about all the animals, the creatures, all these were coming into the ark 2 by 2. It says, all 2 by 2 of all flesh, wherein is the breath, the ruach of life. And again, KJV here, again, using breath for ruach. And here it says the breath of life, right? So now instead of neshama, we actually have ruach used to refer to the breath of life. I think we had neshama used in Genesis 7 because we had these three words that actually are related words. They were all sibling words that related, and I think that's why we had that theme. We wanted to hammer home, just like Adam, Adama, Adam. We had nafak, neshama, and nefesh because they're all related. But then rest of the Bible, you're often going to see ruach referring to breath. Ezekiel 37:14, it says, "I will place my ruach in you, and you will live." And in NET, I think is one of the few versions that actually I think puts breath there, does it correctly. Ecclesiastes 3:18. Actually, going to read a couple verses back to back. It says, Solomon speaking, "I said to myself, as for humans, God tests them so that they may see that they are like the animals." So we're like the animals. How are we? It says, "Surely the fate of humans is like that of animals. The same fate awaits them both. As one dies, so dies the other. All have the same breath, the same ruach. Humans have no advantage over animals. Everything is meaningless. And that word for meaningless there is hebel. But notice, again, NAV, I think, went correctly here, translated ruach as breath. They have breath. We have breath. They die. We die. We decompose. There's nothing different between us and animals when it comes to the way we are alive and the way we die. And it's interesting. It says everything is meaningless. That's the Hebrew word hebel, and it means vapor or breath, literally means those things. And then figuratively, it's talking about things that are effervescent, fleeting, that's here and then gone. So often it's translated as vanity in other translations, or here meaningless, but it's a play on words. He's talking about breath and how, we're all breathing, and then our breath, we die, and boom, the breath is gone, and life is just like the breath is here and gone. And he says it's all just like breath or vanity, play on words, beautiful. You miss that when you don't read the Greek. So he's using hebel to sort of convey, hey, we're all talking about breath here, and at the same time, it's fleeting. And then here is Job, in whose hand is the nefesh of every living thing. So it's the life, how NKJV translated there. In whose hand is the nefesh, the life of everything? It says, and the breath of all mankind. So where do soul and spirit come from? Where do we get these two things? Just our concepts, our modern concepts of it. Well, believe it or not, it comes from Greek philosophy. It's not biblical. I mean, some people will think what they're reading is in the Bible. So I'm not trying to say these people are being unbiblical, but it's not biblical. It's from the Greek. So like the Hebrew, if you're thinking like a Hebrew, the Hebrew is going to say you are a nefesh. Sorry, my night light is coming on. There we go. So you are a nefesh. You are, Adam became the living being. The Greek is going to say you have a pneuma, or it should probably say suke. That's the Greek word. You have a suke. You have a spirit. You have a pneuma. The Hebrew would say you are mortal. Life is fleeting like breath. The Greek will say, well, your body dies, but then your pneuma, your soul, your spirit, it's going to be divine and it's immortal. It will live on. And the result of that then, of these different philosophies, is the Hebrew is going to say you need to take care of your body, because when you take care of your body, you're taking care of yourself. And in fact, the self is kind of a meaning of nefesh. Nefesh begins to be used in place of like myself. Whereas the Greek is going to say, okay, well, I have this beautiful divine pneuma in me, and it wants to get out. It needs to escape my body. My body is a terrible. Wickedness and sin is in the body, and I need to help free this poor pneuma from the body. And you end up with some crazy religions, these monastic religions, because they're emphasizing one aspect. The Greeks, this is called dualism, this concept of you got the body and the soul. And the monists will be all about favoring the soul, to the point of abusing the body horribly. And this is the same word we get the monasteries from then, because you have then the people at the monasteries depriving their body to make death better, to separate the soul. And this comes straight from, for example, Plato. You can read it from the Phaedo by Plato, talking about the death of Socrates. There's a conversation with Socrates and his friends. And here is the example. It says, and is death anything but the separation of soul and body? And being dead is the attainment of this separation, when the soul exists in herself and is parted from the body, and the body is parted from the soul. That is death. And then Socrates replies, exactly, that is nothing else. That and nothing else. Oh, and then we go back, or more Phaedo, for example, it says, the truth rather is that the soul which is pure at departing draws after her no bodily taint, because the body is bad, having never voluntarily had connection with the body. So it's like, oh, poor soul, your soul got attached to the body. Poor soul. And it goes on, which she is ever avoiding. So the soul is trying to get away from the body, herself gathered into herself. And what does this mean? But that she has been a true disciple of philosophy and has practiced how to die easily, and is not philosophy the practice of death. So basically, what Socrates was saying, if you're really smart and you're going to be a philosopher, you're going to use philosophy to sort of deny and deprive your body and prepare yourself to have a very easy death that will let your soul reach its better, more divine potential and not holding it back. This is Greek philosophy. This is not biblical. As we saw, your spirit, soul, all these things are more like you're the soul, and then your spirit is your breath. And then I'm know some of you are going to say in the comments, but there's this verse, but there's that verse. I have been systematically going through all of them, and I have yet to see anything to convince me otherwise. And I'll be happy to go through step by step with you, or take you through the Bible studies that are prepared, if you really have, an interest in really exploring more about the truth of what the soul and spirit really is. So feel free to connect with us at BibleAsk.org, and I would look forward to continuing the conversation. And Tina, anything you'd like to add to this?
I think you were very thorough, and I think that's, definitely a really good answer to, it's not a super simple question, as far as, what basically, what happens when you die, and, where does your soul go? It's not necessarily a soul, like you're saying, it's a breath. And like, I think it's so clear when you see other verses like Psalms 104:29, it says, talking about God, you hide your face, they're troubled. You take away their breath, they die and return to their dust. And so just like you're saying, the breath goes back to God who gave it. The body returns to the dirt where it was from. And so, and no longer, a living being, because that's what death is. It's a separation of the breath and the body. And that's it. And it's simple. It's just like a sleep, because one day God will wake up those who are right with him, and we'll all get to go to heaven, like it says, in Thessalonians, or 2 Thessalonians 4, 1 Thessalonians 4, excuse me, talking about, the second coming of Christ. So those that sleep. So